Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hello everyone. This is Muhammad Zahed again with a new video, and this video inshallah ta'ala, as you can see, we are gonna talk about the fuel system and the fuel system in the light aircraft such as Cessna 172 and the Pipers and these light aircraft. So let's start. Bismillah. To start talking about the fuel system, we have to know what the fuel is. Great, because we want to talk about the fuel system. So what is a fuel? What do you think is a fuel? Fuel is a liquid or a substance or a fluid, okay? And where we use the fuel? We use the fuel normally in all the machines that runs on fuel, like such as aircraft, cars, trucks, what else? Generators, okay? Why we use the fuel? We use the fuel to generate power or electricity or energy. Okay, so how can I generate energy from the fuel? What do you think? We have to convert this fuel. Okay, how can I convert the fuel? I have to burn the fuel to give me power or energy. So from here, from this small question, I can see that we have the fuel definition. So what is fuel? Fuel is a fluid which we can convert it or burn it to give us power, okay? And we can use it and we use it in all the machines that runs on fuel. Okay, great. So what is a fuel system then? The fuel system in the light aircraft we have, such as Cessna 172 and the Piper Warrior or Cherokee. So what is fuel system? Fuel system is a system designed to store, manage, and deliver the fuel from place to another. Okay, to deliver the fuel from place to another. Okay, I have to deliver the fuel. Where I'm going to deliver the fuel to? To deliver the fuel from the fuel tanks to the engine, where I can actually convert or burn this fuel. Because as we said in the fuel definition, that we can burn or convert this fuel to give us power. So I'm not gonna burn this fuel inside the fuel tank, otherwise I'm gonna make an explosion. Okay, great. So what is fuel system? The definition of fuel system. Fuel system is a system designed to store, manage, and deliver the fuel from the fuel tanks to the engine. So this system actually consists of some of the crucial elements or components, such as you can see here in this picture, such as the fuel tanks, the fuel lines, the fuel selector valve, the strainer, the primer, and the carburetor. Okay, so these actually the most important elements or components of the fuel system. And also we can say that we have also the fuel gauge and some other elements which is not exist in this picture. Okay, great. So let's start directly explain, because we said that we just said what are the elements of this system. So let's talk a little bit about the fuel tanks. What is the function of the fuel tanks? What do you think is the function of the fuel tanks? The fuel tanks actually is where I can store the fuel and keep it safe from all the dirt that comes from the external environment. Okay, makes sense. And actually these fuel tanks are stored inside the wing of the aircraft. So as you can see here in this picture, this is a picture about the wings components or elements, the elements of the wings. As you can see here, we have the fuel tank is stored or located inside the wing, close to the beginning of the wing. So we call this part the wing root, and this part the wing tip. So this is the beginning of the wing, and this is the end of it. The wing root is where the wing connected to the fuselage of the aircraft, and the wingtip is the end of the wing. As you can see here, also we have wing flap and aileron. I'm not gonna talk about it. Inshallah, we're gonna talk about it in maybe in another video. But in a simple definition, aileron is one of the main flight control, and flap is one of the secondary flight control. Also here we're supposed to have a skin, but we don't have it, so you can see all the elements. You can see also here the ribs. The ribs is like the ribs we have as a human. So what is the ribs? The ribs actually give the shape of the wing. Let's say if the wing is thick or thin. So the ribs is actually what give the wings its shape. Also we have the spar. The spar here is the most important element we have inside the wing. Why? Because the spar is like the backbone. Okay, what do you mean by that? Like we said, the ribs is like the ribs we have as a human. Also the spar is like the backbone we have. Let's say you have ribs, but you don't have a backbone. What's gonna happen? You can't stand, you can't move. The same thing. Your body is very weak. So the same thing with the wing. If you don't have a spar, you don't have the strength you need to fly that aircraft, or you don't have the strength you need for that wing to fly. So the spring is the most important element which connect all these parts with each other. So we said the fuel tanks actually are located inside the wing. Why do you think the fuel tank are located inside the wing? What do you think? Actually, they are located inside the wing because of the balance of the aircraft. Let's assume, for example, that the fuel tanks are in the tail of the aircraft. What's gonna happen? The center of gravity will go afterward, and maybe will be, let's say if I have full tanks, for example, and the fuel tanks are in the tail of the plane, the center of gravity maybe it's possibly is gonna be like outside of the limit or the range of the center of gravity. So they put the fuel tanks inside the wing because of the balance of the aircraft, as almost the wing are in the middle of the aircraft. They are not actually in the middle, but we can say almost in the middle, because also we said this is because of the balance of the aircraft. So here, before continuing, I have to talk about the fuel, because we're still talking about the fuel system. So normally in the Cessna 172 and the Piper, we use avgas. What is avgas? Is the petrol we use in these aircraft. Av stand for aviation and gas for gasoline. Okay, and normally we use avgas 100 LL. What is 100? 100 is stand for the grade of the fuel. For example, we have avgas 80 or 100 or 100 LL, and also we have fuel which they use it in the modern aviation. It's called like Jet Alpha 1. So we use actually avgas 100 LL. We said that 100 stands for the grade of the fuel. What is the grade? Is actually, let's say, the grade here is for the octane. What is octane? We can say in a simple definition, octane is like, let's say, it's like a measure for the fuel resistance to combustion. Okay, so the higher the number, the higher the resistance, and the lower the number, the lower the resistance. So let's for example assume that I don't have a fuel. For example, let's say my aircraft, I'm using in my aircraft avgas 100, for example, and I have, for example, it's an example, and I went to another airfield where they have actually avgas 80, and they have avgas 120. I don't think there is avgas 120, but it's an example. So which avgas you are going to use? Normally you don't fly in this situation, but let's say you are forced to fly. You choose the fuel with the higher octane, so with the higher resistance, because otherwise, if you choose fuel with lower resistance, what's gonna happen? It's possibly that you're gonna face a detonation in your engine. And normally the LL stands for low lead. What is lead? Lead is a material exists in the fuel. It doesn't really play a huge role or like a function, but let's say, for example, normally we use 100 LL in the modern aviation because it reduces the environmental impact, but it doesn't really, there is not really a big difference between 100 and 100 LL, maybe only like because the environmental impact. So as you can see here in this picture, we're still talking about the fuel system. So the fuel tanks are located inside the wing. As you can see on the top of each fuel tank, we have a lead or a cap. This cap, which we can easily twist it off and pump the fuel inside the tanks. It's important here to talk about something, the ventilation system of the fuel tanks, or for example, the vents we have in each tanks. Each one of these lead or cap, each one has a small vent in it. Why do we need a vent in this lead? Actually, because we don't want to face a vacuum effect. What is a vacuum effect? Let's say, for example, I don't have any vent in these tanks. What's gonna happen? The fuel, let's say I have full tanks and I just started the aircraft, what's gonna happen? The fuel initially will start flow to the engine, but with the time there is nothing replacing this fuel. So what's gonna happen? The fuel is gonna stuck inside the fuel tank, and I don't have a fuel flow anymore. So that's why it's necessary to have some vents. And here I can, maybe it's easily like, then we can equalize the pressure outside and inside the aircraft. When you look also in the top of each tanks, you can see that we have fuel drains. These are small drains we have at the top of, in the bottom of each tank, which we can use a fuel tester to check the fuel color and to be sure that I don't have, for example, there is no contaminants or impurities or dirt in this fuel. And also we have to check the color. As we said, also I forgot to mention something here, that F-gas actually it has a blue color. Why? The blue color, it doesn't really like, there's nothing special with it, but they use the blue color for the F-gas to facilitate the distinguishing between the F-gas 100 LL and other fuel types, especially for these for the ground vehicle. And this is important actually in the airports and in the, let's say, in the airport to for example avoiding misfueling for the aircraft. So I can from here use a fuel tester. I can put it there in the fuel drains, and I can take a small sample, where I can check that there is no dirt or the color of the F-gas. Also here we have the fuel selector. The fuel selector is like a valve we have inside the cockpit. It has actually 4 positions: right, left, both, and off. When I'm using, let's say I turn the fuel selector to the right. So what's gonna happening here? What is happening here? What's happening here actually is that I'm only using the right tank, and let's say vice versa. For example, I'm using the left side. I'm using the left tank. I'm using the both tanks. So I have fuel flow coming from the both tanks. Off, I don't have fuel flow anymore. Strainer is like a filter, where it's almost like a filter where I can it actually filtering the fuel and make sure that there is nothing go to the fuel system. Let's say, for example, if any contaminants or dirt made it and went through the tanks to the strainer. So what's gonna happen here? The strainer will clean this fuel coming from the fuel tank, and this is actually very important. Okay, great. Here also we have here the primer. What is a primer? Primer also is like a valve we have in the cockpit, where we easily can inject the fuel directly to the cylinder. And this is actually, it's important, especially in the cold morning, where the temperature is low actually, and sometimes we face a problem to start the engine or the aircraft. So the fuel primer, it helps us to inject the fuel directly to the cylinder. Okay, and finally here we have the carburetor. What is the carburetor? So before start talking about a carburetor, because we are talking about the fuel, and we said we have to burn the fuel to give us power. So what are the fire elements? The fire elements are 3: fuel or any flammable thing, for example, oxygen, and what else? A spark to start the fire, or to start the fire. So because we said we have to convert the fuel or burn it to give us power. So we have to do something firstly. We have to mix the fuel with the oxygen, because itself, if I don't have oxygen, it's impossible to burn the fuel. So we have to mix the fuel with the oxygen to start burning the fuel. And this is what's happening here. This is what the carburetor actually do. So the carburetor is a device used to mix the fuel with the air actually. Okay, that's perfect. And also it's important because as long as you are climbing, or let's say you are climbing, the air is becoming thinner with the time and with the altitude. So what we have to do is to adjust the throttle. How can I adjust the throttle? By leaning it a little bit. So make the throttle a little bit, to lean the throttle, and then I will decrease the fuel quantity entering the carburetor because the air is becoming thinner. So this is the carburetor. The carburetor, as we said, is a device used to mix the fuel with the oxygen. Okay, that's amazing. Let's also here talk about the fuel system, the type of the fuel system. From here, as you can see, we can actually divide or broken down this fuel system to two subsystems: gravity fed system and fuel pump system. Normally, let's talk a little bit about the gravity fed system. I'm not gonna really explain this part because I don't think it's really important. No, I think it's important, but you don't have to go through everything in it. So the fuel system, as we said, we can broken down this system to two subsystems, and we have gravity fed system and fuel pump system. So the gravity fed system, from the name, bro, like gravity. So I'm using the gravity to fed the system. Okay, that's great. And what the meaning of that? That's mean I'm using the weight force or the gravity force to deliver the fuel, or to take the fuel from the fuel tanks to the engine. Okay, where do we use actually this system? We use it actually in the Cessna 172. That normally in the Cessna with the high wing. Why? Because as we said, the fuel tanks are located inside the wing, and as long as the wing is actually located above the wing, above the engine, that's mean I can deliver or take the fuel from the fuel tanks to the engine by gravity, right? Because the fuel is right now located above the engine. Also, the other type is fuel pump system. The fuel pump system, normally we use it actually in the low wing aircraft. I'm not gonna say specially, because we use it actually in all the low wing aircraft, such as Piper, Slings, Cirrus, what else? So why we use the fuel pump system? Because when the wing right now is located actually below the engine, so I can't use the gravity to take the fuel from the fuel tanks to the engine anymore. So I have to do something here. So that's why they created the fuel pump system. The fuel pump system, where I have inside the fuel system a fuel pump to take the fuel, to suck the fuel from the fuel tanks to the engine. And also it's important here to mention that usually in the fuel pump system, we have two fuel pumps inside the aircraft, an electrical and engine driven pump. Okay, that's important. Let's go and see the second page. Let's talk a little bit about it here. There are fuel gauges in the cockpit to indicate the quantity. So that's basic, but it's good airmanship to check the contents of the tanks visually prior to flight. So don't trust this indicator. Please don't trust this indicator, and you have to go and check the fuel tanks visually, because this indicator work because there's some sensors inside these tanks, and it's very possible that this is not the actual quantity inside these tanks, and this is actually happened a lot with me. Okay, it's important to take a small sample. As we said, here we are talking about the fuel drains, so it's important to take a small sample from the fuel drains fitted at low points of the fuel system, as we said, to check that there is no impurities or contaminants inside this fuel and there is no water, and also to check the fuel color. The fuel tank selector in the cockpit Allow the fuel to be supplied from each tank as desired from all tanks. We just explained that, and we said that we have a fuel selector, and I can use any fuel tank I want, the left, the right, or both of them, and also I can switch it off, so there is no fuel flow anymore. Okay, here also we have an aircraft may have a main tank in one wing and an auxiliary tank in the other. Okay, that's maybe it's possible, it's very rare, because also like this will affect the balance of the aircraft. So that's why normally we use the both tank, especially in the Cessna, because we have like 4 position. In the Piper we don't have, and also in the Sling we don't have 4 positions. We actually have 3 position, off, left, and right. So usually in these aircraft we have to switch the tanks from the left to the right or from the right to the left, maybe each 15 to 30 minutes, depend on the school. Okay, great. Here you can see in this picture the fuel types, and this is Avgas 80. It's a red, has a red color. Avgas 100 Avgas, green. Avgas 100 LL low lead has a blue color. This is the fuel we use usually, and this is fuel jet alpha or alpha 1. We use it actually for in the modern aviation, in the jet actually. Fuel grade for Cessna is Avgas, as we said, 100 LL low lead. And here in this picture we can see the I think this picture is more clear. So you can see here the fuel selector. This is the fuel selector for a Cessna 172 or a Cessna, both right, left, and off, and that's how you can choose the tank you wanna use. Okay, thank you so much for watching this video. I wish it was useful and helpful for you, and inshallah azza wa jal, we will see you in the coming videos. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.